Hey, welcome to another character profile. Today we're going to be looking at Gideon. Today we're going to be just kind of starting looking at his in Judges chapter 6. They were having trouble with the Midianite army. They were destroying crops. They actually had to they were so far south, they had to leapfrog over Ammonite territory, and the Ammonites were taking advantage of it too. And they're like, well, I guess, if Midian's attacking them, we'll attack them too. So the Israelites started crying out to God again like they had done before, but this time God sent a prophet. But they were worshiping all these idols. They were building shrines to the Baal and Ashtoreth. They were worshiping them and had altars and shrines to them. And so God told them through this prophet, this stuff was happening because it was a judgment for sin. And any nation that thinks they can just go about doing whatever they want and ignoring God is going to find that there's some consequences to this. There's this guy, Gideon, and he actually brought a crop of wheat to the point of harvest. He was able to harvest it without it getting taken or destroyed, but he had to thresh it out down in a wine press because it's kind of sunken down in, and he's able to do that out of the view of anybody that might rat him out to the Midianites. And so all of a sudden, the angel of the Lord shows up. Now, he doesn't quite know who this guy is right away. He figures it out in a little bit. We believe that the angel of the Lord is actually what we call a Christophany. It's Jesus Christ showing up in Old Testament times. Jesus would show up from time to time, and he would work with someone, minister to them, speak to them, whatever it might be. Well, the angel of the Lord shows up. He speaks to Gideon, and he says, "Hail, mighty warrior." Gideon starts looking around like, who are you talking to? I'm the only guy here, and that's clearly not me. I'm not that guy, okay? And he says, yeah, no, God is with you. He says, if God's with me, if God's with us, then why is all this bad stuff happening? Like why does this stuff keep happening if God is with us? And so he says, well, I'm sending you to go and fight against the Midian army. And Gideon says, okay, well, that's fine. Then can I offer you a meal, like some kind of an offering to you? And he says, well, sure. So Gideon goes and he prepares like some meat, some grain, something to drink, all this stuff. And then he touches it with his staff and the meal is consumed in a flame. Then he disappears. At this point, Gideon realizes this is not just a dude. He realizes it's the angel of the Lord. So from here on in the story, Gideon recognizes the voice of the Lord and he obeys it and he follows it. What the Lord tells him to do is Gideon's father has altars to Baal. He has an Asherah pole made out of wood. And so he says, pull down the altar to Baal, cut down the wood from that, make an altar to God, and make a sacrifice on it. Well, he's scared of the townspeople, and so he does it at night. He gets some of his father's servants, gets 10 men, and they take care of business. In the morning, everybody wakes up, and they're like, what happened to Baal's stuff? What happened to it? Who did this? And they figure out who it is, and they say, we're going to kill him. Even though it was his father's altar, his father takes up for his son, and he says, well, if Baal's mad about it, he can do something about it. So from that moment on, they started calling him, instead of Gideon, they called him Jerubbaal, which means, may Baal contend with him. The interesting thing is, Baal can't contend with him because he isn't a real God. But from this moment on, the Spirit of the Lord is in Gideon. He empowers him and he dwells within him. That comes on him in a mighty force. And so Gideon calls together an army. And I love it at every one of these stories how there's an army that gets called. Men that are ready to fight. There's people that are ready to fight. They're just waiting for a ruler to step up. They're waiting for somebody to step up and say, today is the day and now is the time. I think there's an army of people of God who are ready to stand up and to fight against the demonic things going on in this world, to step in against the idols and to say, well, there's too much idol worship in our land. There's too many places where people are avoiding God and living for sin, and it's time for that to come to an end. Gideon, of course, you would think that he's ready to go, even with the Spirit of God in him, but he's still not quite sure. And there's a couple times throughout his story that we'll see where this comes into place. Specifically in this part, in chapter 6, he says, well, can I put a test out? Give me a couple days. Gideon, what he does is, it says that the first test that he did was he put a fleece out. And he says, God, if there is dew only on the fleece and not on the ground, then I'll know it's a sign. And sure enough, the ground's dry, but he wrings water out of the fleece. Well, then the next day he says, Lord, please don't be angry with me, but let me do one more test. Let the fleece be dry and there be dew on the ground. And so sure enough, that's how it was. And so he knew that that was a sign that only God could do it. And so he took that as his sign. I don't think that's how God is calling us to live. I think God wants us to act in faith, and when He calls us, we should stand up and go. We need to learn from the lesson that Gideon had and say, when God speaks, He means it. We don't have to test Him or try Him. If we've heard the voice of God, we should act on it. Well, stay tuned for part 2. We're going to see a little bit more about the battle, and it's a real interesting way that he gathers an army and the turns that it takes in his life after that as well. So stay tuned, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button on the video if you don't mind, drop a comment if you want to tell me what idols you think exist in our world today. What are the idols that we struggle with that are pulling us away from God? Thanks. Appreciate you watching.